Some more wooden quivers. I've looked and it doesn't seem there's anyone out there making wooden quivers, with the exception of some pretty nice quivers that attach to a bow. But as far as freestanding wooden quivers, haven't really seen any. And anyway, if you're interested in wooden quivers, have a look here. This is a piece of cocobolo, and I won't be seeing much more of this. I managed to get a hold of some clearance stuff, and once this is gone, it's at least going to be very expensive. But you have a board. This is pretty smooth. Sometimes they're real ugly and rough. You can't really look at the board and see that it could really amount to anything. This is for off the shelf, already looking kind of nice. You can get an idea of what you'd get out of that. Again, that's a piece of cocobolo. I believe it's Mexican cocobolo. This is the beginning of one. This is very roughly sanded, and it's been cut to shape and cut and sanded to shape. So that may eventually turn into a quiver. Today I almost finished one. Same exact piece of wood, same board, just the other end. This is not finished yet, but you can see with just a bit of, that's beeswax and cedar oil, my own mixture. Same beeswax I use for my bowstring mixture, which is western pine rosin melted with beeswax. That's what I use on my strings. But this is how it cleans up. It's an interesting piece of wood. You get this strange looking pattern in there and on the back side. So to make these, again, this is same board. I'm trying to see if this is visible on camera. You can see how pale the unfinished one is, and finishing it with a 220 grit, or maybe 200, and putting a bit of oil and beeswax on there, that's how it changes. What I do is I take scrap leather. I was given some leather by a couple of sources. Josh, thank you for the leather. But I'm running low, so I don't really know how many more of these I'll be making anytime soon. But I get these spring steel clips. I prefer the ones with 2 holes. They're more versatile, and if you need another hole, you don't have to drill it. And I will drill a hole. The wood will split. A lot of these hardwoods, they'll really split on you if you just screw them in without drilling a hole. First, so I drill these 2 holes. I'll put the lever sandwiched between the wood and the clip. And I'll add glue, typically. This one is 1 hole, 1 screw. And what I do is I'll fold the leather, which kind of opens up the arrow retainer. And as I said, this is unfinished. This will have a sheet of leather sewed to the edges. And what I've experienced with some of these quivers, for example this, I'm still learning and improving designs. If you see this, it's a bit shallow. So if you're hopping around and doing gymnastics while you're shooting, which you don't always do, the arrows can fall out if you lean too steeply. So on this one, I intend to bring it up about twice the height. And I think that will really secure the arrows. And what you'll end up with is something lightweight, made of wood, but that works. And the design is intended, and you can clip it on your belt. I often clip it on my pocket because it lowers the arrows. It keeps them out of my range of motion. And to illustrate with one that's already completed. I'll use this if I'm walking through the woods or when I'm walking to the shooting site. And sometimes I'll use it while shooting. If you put it over the shoulder this way, they're pretty accessible. You can grab them out. A little difficult to put back in that way, but you can certainly take them out. Primarily, when I shoot, I'll wear it just hanging on the pocket. And they stay out of my way. I have no problem with that. It's a bit time consuming. It's cheap if you get a good deal on wood and you have the scrap leather. I don't know how lucrative it would be to make these and sell them to those interested. The sanding work is probably the sanding and the sewing. So sanding without an electric sander. Yeah, I'm being pretty primitive here, but I don't have a belt sander, but not an electric sander. So it takes time putting a finer finish on there, getting out all the scratches from the 60 grit, which I use for the final shaping. Okay, so this is kind of a failure here. This is a piece of walnut. And sometimes to lighten and also add some artistic curiosity to the quivers, I will carve things. This is silly. I don't think I'll ever do anything with this. If someone needs a quick, cheap quiver, I'll probably throw some leather on there and just pass it along. But that's what you get out of a piece of walnut. Nothing extraordinary, but certainly not ugly. If you remove my mangling, it's still a nice piece of wood, and you can get them pretty thin, and there's flexibility, and you want them as thin as you can for weight. You can make it an inch thick, and you're going to be wearing a 2x4, and it's not going to be any fun. You can get them pretty thin, and my goal is to get them as thin as I can, while still retaining some strength so that these last a long time and are comfortable to wear. When you add the leather, the screw, and the hardware, it adds a bit of weight, but not much. If you do it right, they're light. So that's the wooden quiver. Again, to show the details here, if you look here, you may be able to see that I have drilled many holes on the edge. What I'll do is fold a piece of leather. This will be the front side, so the pouch will be here. And I do this partially to conserve on leather and not just rely on glue or a bunch of hardware. And on the back side, the overlap will be trimmed to right about here. It will be folded over here and then just sewn. I'm still learning about sewing, leather work and sewing. It's not really something that you waltz into and do a brilliant job unless you have a special talent, and I don't, so I have to learn. In the end, this will not be a masterpiece by any means, but it will be a nice, functional quiver. But that's the basic concept. You drill your holes so the thread doesn't add any significant weight. You put your upper arrow retainer up here, and again, I've kind of fold it and angle it down, and that allows the arrows to slip in there nice and easy. When I have a screw that comes through, I'll take a hacksaw blade and chop off the ends, which will often gouge the wood, so I'll have to resand it. And then I polish that down. That's nice and smooth. You can see them, but they're as smooth as the wood. And you can get these spring steel clips in packages of 10 or whatever, and they're pretty cheap, and they're rugged. And this is an old belt that I chopped in half. I got 2 strips out of it. Not real pretty. If I really wanted to take the time to make this real nice, I'd probably just use nicer leather to begin with. But I'd come in here and maybe sand down the edges and dye that. I certainly won't be doing that. So that's it. If you want to make a wooden quiver, they really actually work. I don't know why more people don't. Leather is expensive. Good leather is expensive. And a lot of that stuff you'll buy on Amazon. It's coming from you know where, and who knows what the history or even the content is. A lot of sellers will sell leather as full grain real leather. It ends up being some kind of composite crap. And this is a different design that I'll probably give up on this design. But I've made a few of these. And if you look, what I have is another piece of cocobolo. And that's the angle. So that's the way it would sit on the belt. It hangs down. This is, again, another example of a mixture of artistic aspirations, but also efficiency in lightening the weight. And as you can see here, there's no hardware attaching this. I drilled holes and sewed it on. And that's two separate pieces. And here again is the arrow retainer. And I will show how this works. This is a belt quiver. And you clip it on the belt. I usually move it back. This will hold a dozen arrows. It feels awkward with a dozen arrows in it, but 6 arrows, you don't feel it at all. And it's a nice speed quiver, a nice target quiver. Not the best for running around, because you can see if you turn backward and hop around and do somersaults and stuff, the arrows are going to come out. But that's how it works. And for relaxed target practice, pull out the arrow, shoot, and they slip back in easily. You can get the arrows in and out rather easily. And the design of this, as you can see on the back side, I have 2 clips. And the general strategy for this is, again, to get it as thin as it can be while remaining strong. And you may not be able to see, but this center area is thick, and you can possibly see how it tapers down. And I thin out the wood that overlaps the clips, because I have the strength of the steel to back that up. And this is left a bit thicker, and so are these. This I thin out a bit because it's not really doing a whole lot, but I do need to get the screw in there. And I could sew these. I could sew the upper arrow retainer on, and that's probably a better idea. This is simply the fast and easy way to plug in a screw, and again you can see they've been polished down. This is also finished with beeswax and cedar oil that I had a tin of. In the future, when I run out of cedar oil, I'll probably use tung or some other decent oil. But that's another cocobolo belt quiver. And the pieces are really neat. You get all sorts of variations from one piece to the next, and you can get some very, very intricate patterns. For example, camera probably won't show that, but this ring here, I think that's pretty neat. And sometimes they're very, very clear and detailed. This is kind of mediocre. But that's that's the basic concept. Again, another wooden quiver. No one makes wooden quivers. And for those interested in wood in general, this is kumaro. And I have I made one of these out of ipe, and it broke on me. And ipe is strange. You don't really know what variety of ipe it is, if it's real ipe. But ipe has a superior janka hardness to kumaro. It's supposedly a very tough wood. It's damn near fireproof. It's a very hard wood, pain in the ass to work with, dulls the tools, high silica content, so it's great for the lungs. This probably has some silica in it too. But what I find is the kumaro, despite having a lower janka hardness, can be a really badass wood. I've made rings out of this. If you look at one of the first videos, I think it was the first video I ever posted, where I hammer test a kumaro thumb ring. And I just beat the hell out of it, and it doesn't break. and I take a piece of ipe, the first time I strike the ring, it breaks. Catalox is really good strong wood. The Brazilian ebony is pretty good. A couple of other woods which have held up. But if I'm correct and that is Kumaru, it just seems to be the toughest wood I've ever gotten hold of. So this cane, the board wasn't thick enough to match the end here. So I ended up wrapping a piece of leather, gluing that, and then I put on the rubber boot. But it's a pretty tough. It's a really tough wood. You could whack something with this. But the toughness and the hardness of the wood allows you to get a thinness and an elegance that might be difficult with other woods. If you look at how thin that is, it still has ample grip to it, but it's not bulky, and yet it's super, super tough. So I'm thinking maybe I might start building custom canes. I have needed a cane at times when I have injuries or reactivated injuries and my back's not working or whatever. But that is Kumaru, interesting wood, and I'm not sure. I haven't researched Kumaru enough, but I think it might actually be some kind of fruit or nut-bearing tree. Hopefully they take it easy on those things. That's it. I had mentioned that I'd be showing the bronze rings. That's probably going to be next week. There have been continued delays with that. I had intended to do that earlier this week, but I should have that done sometime by midweek next week, and I'll probably film the casting so you can see the bronze being poured, and not the casting, but, well, I guess you call it casting. I don't have my metal terminology very well versed, but I'll have those rings next week, and unless something very unusual prevents that, and I will test them and see how well they work. I think I'll have 2 of each. Unfortunately, they'll be in my size, but if they work, I intend to make a lot more in various sizes, and one more source for thumb rings. You have Vermeil, which makes great thumb rings, and custom thumb rings, which also makes really fine thumb rings. You can get a titanium thumb ring for them for $400, but they sell the stainless steel thumb rings for $60. Pretty interesting. Anyway, I'll be one more source of thumb rings on the scene here soon, perhaps, if there's any interest.